Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Buddha, the blessed, noble, and fully self-awakened one. Very good. So last week we tackled this very cryptic, couldn't have saying from the Buddha, this very cryptic teaching. He couldn't have reduced his teaching any further, I don't think. It was about Bahiya of the bark cloth. So I said that this week we would actually read the discourse and revise what we said, because it's quite difficult, really. So the collection that this belongs to, by the way, is called the Udana, Udana. I'll try to remember to put it in the chat box for you, which you can buy as a little booklet. It's translated by John Ireland. So that's where this translation comes from. Okay, the Bahiya Sutta. This is about Bahiya. Thus have I heard, at one time the Lord was staying near Savatthi in the Jeta wood at Anathapindika's monastery. And at that time, Bahiya the barkcloth was living by the seashore at Suparaka. He was respected, revered, honored, venerated, and given homage, and was one who obtained the requisites of robes, alms food, lodging, and medicines. Now, we said last week that he was probably a follower of a particular Brahman sect, depending on the Upanishad, and that their signature was wearing bark cloth. But here, it's really talking about the myth that arose from him, whereby he gets shipwrecked, and he must have had a Damascene moment out at sea, because when he lands, he doesn't want to be a merchant anymore. He wants to be a samana, an ascetic, and he gains the respect of everybody. And these four requisites, robes, alms, food, lodging, and medicines, that's the requisites of the Buddhist order. It's very basic, isn't it? You know, like, that's all you need to live. Just something to wear, something to eat, somewhere to a roof over your head, and medicine when you're sick. So now, while he was in seclusion, this reflection arose in the mind of Bahiya of the barkcloth. Am I one of those in the world who are arahats and who have entered the path of arahatship? Now, the word arahat is an honorific, really. It's the blessed one, or the holy one, or something like that. But of course, it's given to somebody who's completed the path. Then a Devata, who was a former blood relation of Bahiya of the barkcloth, understood this reflection in his mind. Being compassionate and wishing to benefit him, she approached Bahiya and said, "You, Bahiya, are neither an arahat, nor have you entered the path to arahatship. You do not follow that practice whereby you could be an arahat or enter the path of arahatship." That's a bit crushing, isn't it? I mean, a poor man's living the best he can, and this Devatas told him he's wasting his time. Then he asks, in the world, including the Devas, all the gods, who are the arahats and who have entered the path of arahatship? There is Bahiya in a far country, a town called Savatthi. There the Lord now lives, who is an arahat and fully enlightened one. That Lord Bahiya is indeed an arahat, and he teaches the Dharma for the realization of arahatship. Then Bahiya of the barkcloth, profoundly stirred by the words of that Devata, then and there departed from Suparaka, stopping only one night everywhere along the way. He went to Savatthi, where the Lord was staying at the Jeta wood at Anathapindika's monastery. Now, at that time, a number of bhikkhus were walking up and down, doing walking meditation in the open air. Then Bahiya of the barkcloth approached those bhikkhus and said, "Where, revered sirs, is the Lord now living, the arahat, the fully enlightened one? We wish to see the Lord, who is an arahat, the fully enlightened one. The Lord Bahiya has gone an alms round among the houses." Then Bahiya hurriedly left the Jeta Grove. Entering Savatthi, he saw the Lord walking for alms food in Savatthi. Pleasing, lovely to see, with calm senses and tranquil mind, attained to perfect poise and calm, controlled, a perfected one, watchful with restrained senses. So that's a classic trope describing the Buddha. On seeing the Lord, he approached, fell down with his head at the Lord's feet and said, "Teach me Dharma, Lord, teach me Dharma, Sugata, so that it will be for my good and the happiness for a long time." This Sugata translates literally as well gone. It obviously means somebody who's transcended, gone to Nirvana. Upon being spoken to thus, the Lord said to Bahiya the bark cloth, "It is an unsuitable time, Bahiya. We've entered among the houses for alms food." A second time, Bahiya said to the Lord, "It is difficult to know for certain, revered sir, how long the Lord will live and how long I will live. Teach me Dharma, Lord, teach me Dharma, Sugata, so that it will be for my good and happiness for a long time." A second time, the Lord said to Bahiya, "It is an unsuitable time, Bahiya. We have entered among the houses for alms food." But Bahiya wouldn't give up, you see. A third time, Bahiya said to the Lord, "It is difficult to know for certain, revered sir, how long the Lord will live and how long I will live. Teach me Dharma, Lord. Teach me Dharma, Sugata, so that it will be for my good and happiness for a long time." Now, this is one of these things that perhaps was part of the age. If you could ask 3 times, and if the answer was still no, there was no point in asking again. So this time, the Buddha took pity on poor old Bahiya, and he said this: "Here in Bahiya, you should train yourself thus. In the seen will be merely what is seen. In the heard will be merely what is heard. In the sensed will be merely what is sensed. In the cognized will be merely what is cognized. In this way, you should train yourself, Bahiya." Okay, so now this is referring directly to our Vipassana practice. So in the Buddha categorizes consciousnesses according to the sense base, okay? So you have eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose, taste, and body consciousness, and the mind consciousness. So what the mind is aware of course, is the internal life, the interior life of emotions and thoughts. So these are your 6 bases, and it's upon these bases that consciousness arises. Okay. So he says, so when Bahiya, when you are in the scene, when for you in the scene is merely what is seen, in the heard is merely what is heard, in the sensed, which means smelling and tasting, in the sensed will be merely what is sensed, in the cognized is merely what is cognized, then Bahiya, you will not be with that. When Bahiya you are not with that, you will not be in that. When Bahiya you are not in that, then Bahiya you will be neither here nor beyond, nor in between the two. Just this is the end of suffering. Now, he's saying to Bahiya, you will not be in that. Now, remember, if we go back to this, this Upanishad, it's talking about the unknown knower, right? It's always pointing to somebody, the one who understands, the sensor, etc., etc. So now, what Bahiya seems to have been doing is looking for this knower. And of course, he's not finding it. So the Buddha tries to avert him from that and draw him down to the level where he's just experiencing things without the sense of I. So at that very base level, there's always a sense base. And a sense base has some object that it's sensing, okay? So obviously, you know, if you've got eyes and you're looking, then you'll see something. Like, for instance, now you're seeing me, yeah? Now, those two then have to have some way of relating that information onto something that can be seen, can be known. And that's what consciousness is. That's the khandha consciousness, the consciousness of the aggregates. All these consciousness are dependent on a sense base, okay? Now, in our meditation, you see, what we're trying to do is to get down to that level where there isn't an I. What happens normally is we see something, we don't see it as it is, we see it within a category, which is our conceptual understanding. So when I see, for instance, an apple, I don't see that apple as something distinct and spare. I see it within my concepts of what apples are. And depending on that concept, I'll be able to say to myself, well, this is a sweet apple, or it's not so sweet. And then, of course, there's, I like sweet apples, I don't like unsweet apples. And then once you've said that, you have a relationship with it. I want a sweet apple, or simply want a sweet apple. And then you get the I want a sweet apple. Now, what he's asking Bahiya to do is to cut through that whole mentation dependent on a delusion of an I and get down to basics. And once he does that, of course, he recognizes that there is something which is aware of what's on that screen of consciousness. And that separation allows him to make the insight of what he really is before he becomes an I. Now, I hope that hasn't confused you completely, right? It's quite, the teaching is quite difficult. So when he says you are not with that, in other words, you don't identify with the object, right? By way of conceptual understanding, the apple, right? You're not in that, you're not identifying with the sense base, right? The taste, the sense of taste. And when you don't identify with that, what comes up on the screen is pure, without the manipulation, the distortion of liking, not liking, wanting, not wanting, okay? And that's when we're able to see that there is something which is distinct from everything that we're experiencing. And that's the process of awakening. That's what it is. So okay, so then he says, now through this brief Dharma teaching of the Lord, the mind of Bahiya the Barcloth was immediately freed from the taints without grasping. Then the Lord, having instructed Bahiya with this brief instruction, went away. So now this is the point. This is what happens when we become fully liberated. We are freed from the taints. Now the word is asawa, and there is in that word the meaning, a word su, which means to flow. So it's like the corruptions are flowing out of us. Sometimes they're called inflows, sometimes outflows. And they are the basic delusions that are affecting our lives for the worse, of course. So the first one is the taint craving for sensual pleasure, right? Craving for sensual pleasure. The second one is the craving for existence. In other words, always becoming, right? That's why, you know, anytime death approaches us, we panic. So we want to continue from moment after moment, and we want to be somebody. We're always redefining ourselves. And finally, of course, the taint of ignorance, which of course is not understanding the way things really are. So he's freed of all that. And because he's freed of all that, he's come to the end of suffering. So then, of course, not long after the Lord's departure, a cow with a young calf attacked Bahiya of the Barcloth and killed him. When the Lord, having walked for alms food in Savatthi, was returning from alms road with a number of bhikkhus, on departing from the town, he saw that bhikkhu of that Bahiya of the Barcloth had died. Seeing this, he said to the bhikkhus, "Bhikkhus, take Bahiya's body, put it on a litter, carry it away and burn it, and make a stupa for it. Your companion in the holy life has died." So a stupa would be a mound in those days, that's all. Very well, revered sir, the bhikkhus replied to the Lord. Taking Bahiya's body, they put it on a litter, carried it away and burnt it, and made a stupa for it. Then they went to the Lord, prostrated themselves, and sat down to one side. Sitting there, those bhikkhus said to the Lord, Bahiya's body has been burnt, revered sir, and a stupa has been made for it. What is his destiny? What is his future birth? Bhikkhus, Bahiya of the barkcloth was a wise man. He practiced according to the Dharma and did not trouble me by disputing about Dharma. Bhikkhus, Bahiya of the barkcloth has attained final Nirvana. Now, I love the way this little phrase has been put in there. So, did not trouble me by disputing about Dharma. So he was constantly hassled by people, questioning what he understood, what he taught. I find that a lovely little phrase to tell you something about the Buddha's life. Then on realizing its significance, the Lord uttered on that occasion this inspired utterance. Okay, so this is where he's stating what Nibbana is, okay? Where neither water, nor yet earth, nor fire, nor air find a foothold, gain a foothold. There gleam no stars, no sun sheds light, there shines no moon, yet there no darkness reigns, okay? So the first, of course, is our physicality, which of course includes the whole psychophysical organism, where neither water, these are the four great elements, water, earth, fire, and air. And then the outer world, the material world that we live in, gleam no stars, no sun sheds lights, there shines no moon, yet no darkness reigns. Now, I was listening to a talk by Bhikkhu Bodhi in which he was asked, what is the understanding of this Nibbana, you see? And he said that in the Theravada Buddhism, there were two understandings. The first one was that when you finally purified your heart and it's time to become liberated, the five khandhas, the psychophysical organism, comes to an end, and that's it. Now, I know people who believe that that's what the Buddha's teaching, and I just cannot know the difference between that and annihilation. And the Buddha often in the discourses says he is not teaching annihilation. He says the only things that are annihilated are greed, hatred, and delusion. And then Bhikkhu Bodhi says the second reason, the second understanding, which is the traditional understanding, is that when the psychophysical organism, the five khandhas, come to an end, there is a transcendent experience. And that's what this yet there no darkness reigns is pointing to. And if you actually get that book, the Udana, the inspired verses of the Buddha, you'll see that there's a whole section on Nibbana, and they're all basically pointing to the same thing. Dogen Zenji, actually, the great Zen master, talked about his moment of liberation by saying, the body and mind fell away, right? The body and mind fell away. That's another way of stating it. So then he goes on, when a sage, a Brahmin, has come to know this for himself through his own wise experience, insight experience, then he is freed from form and formless, freed from pleasure and from pain. In other words, he's gone beyond. He's gone beyond all the amazing stuff you can get from absorption techniques, and he's gone beyond all that we can experience, pleasure or pain, from our physicality. So he's always pointing to something which is beyond. Now, he doesn't want to call it, he doesn't want to give it a name, he doesn't want to substantiate it, because then you end up like Bahiya, completely confused, looking for your soul, right? Looking for your eternal self. And that's why he's constantly pointing to it, but not giving it a name. Of course, in later Buddhism, in Mahayana Buddhism, they began talking about it as the Dharmakaya, the body of the truth, sometimes Buddha nature. This inspired utterance was spoken by the Lord also. So did I hear. Very good. Well, as usual, I can only hope my words have been of some assistance, that they have not caused confusion, and that by your careful investigation, you will be liberated from all suffering sooner rather than later.